afternoon, this morning, good morning, good morning. I had the opportunity uh, yesterday for a certain period of time, just realizing how often people spend their lives trying to please other people after they made mistakes. They try to get back in people's good graces because they made an error. And they could be wrong. They literally were wrong in what they did. And they feel horrible for what they may have done. I don't care what it was. But find out that sometimes people like to judge. They like to hold you to what you did wrong. And it's in those times you have to realize at some point you don't have to die or stop living because somebody won't, I won't say forgive you, but they won't even tolerate you for making a mistake. And it may be egregious. It may have been horrible, but you still have to live and you still have to move forward with your life. And so you need to realize that some people may never forgive you. Some people may never be able to see you the same way. And they may have that right. They may be legitimate for them, a legitimate position, but that doesn't mean that you don't deserve to live. And at some point, you have to gain the courage. You have to find the inner strength to still stand up and realize that though you might have made a mistake and though you might have messed up, you're still a human being with a right to life. And I want to encourage you because that's one thing I think that God brings to people's lives or brings to human experience is the capacity to understand that people make mistakes. People can fail. They can fall. They can betray. They can do horrible things. But that person needs to recover as well. And I want you to know that you may not be able to recover in those people's presence. And certain people's presence, you may not be able to recover. But you have a right to life. You have a right to live. You have a right to breathe. You have a right to yet live your best life. It just means some people will never forgive you. They will never understand. They will never believe. They will never receive you again. And be fine with that. Be fine with that. And that does not mean that you must keep reliving the damage you've done. It doesn't mean you got to keep living your mistake. You got to keep living through what you did. You did it. You accept it. But then you have to move on with your life. Amen. And I want to say this. In the human experience, in living life, most people in life, the reason that they fall, that they fail, that they make mistakes is because in a time of crisis, of hurt and pain and confusion in our people's lives, a lot of times we react. We do not respond. We react. We don't know how to respond. People don't know how to respond until after they fall. They mess up, make mistakes. But they react in the midst of the difficulty. They react. They just react on their emotion. They want to find release. They want to find happiness. They're trying to find a break from the hurt, from the pain, from the frustration, from the aggravation, from the irritation. So they react. And in that reaction, that too itself may be detrimental. That reaction might be the wrong one in the long term, but in the moment you just reacted. And out of that reaction, out of that stimulating circumstance, then you learn how to respond. You learn how to respond because you failed, because you made the wrong choice, because you made the wrong decision. You didn't make the best decision, but you reacted to the moment. And I often tell people that you can never let somebody define you by what you did. And in counsel, I always tell people what you did isn't who you are. You can do something, but not be that. You can do something because you reacted in the moment. You made a wrong decision. And I want to make sure that I keep reiterating that. It was the wrong decision. You did hurt someone. You did betray someone. You did fall, drop the ball. You were wrong. But you still have a right to life. And that mistake, that action, that activity doesn't define you. And another thing I learned too, that it's in these moments you discover or you recognize what a real friend is. So people always say you find out who your friends are when you make mistakes. Really, that's not true. You don't find who they are. You found out what a friend looks like. You discover in a moment what a real friend looks like. Because there's always that person that will never judge you. They won't judge you. They tell you was wrong, but they'll stay with you. They'll encourage you. They'll uplift you. They'll be there to hear you. They'll be there when you cry, when you're depressed. They'll be there and they won't judge you. And in that moment, for the first time, you learn what a real friend looks like. And then you discover then, I know who my friends are. There's a lot about this life, living life and human experience that we only learn it by experiencing it. You know, I often tell people that most of us don't get a chance to go to school for every transition of our life. I'm gonna give you an example. For example, you don't get to go from little boy school to teenage school, and then from teenage school to young adult school, from young adult school to grown man school, from grown man school to boyfriend school, from boyfriend school to husband school, from husband school to father school. You don't get classes on all those transitions in your life. You just walk into them. You grow up, you go from 6 to being 12, from 12 to being 18, from 18 to being 21. You meet a girl, you discover girls. Everything is just, you step into it. You just walk into it, but you never train for it. You're never prepared for it. Go from being a grown man with a job, with a car and apartment, and get a wife. You didn't learn how to be a husband. You just got married and they called you a husband. Many of us spend our whole life just transitioning from one position to another and never being taught on how to be those things. And that's in most people. Another thing is too, most people don't even know who they are. They don't. They're learning who they are. And then they find out that a lot of what they are is just a conglomerate of what they've seen, what they've heard, what they've been exposed to. They never had original thought. They never had original idea about who they are. They just becoming what their environmental factors have dictated that they become. And they've never really learned. They never really have learned who they are in their essence. And I was just, I find myself speaking to people this week and looking at life, man. Life isn't fair. It doesn't play fair. Life has too many variables in it. And many times, because of the external factors, you find yourself being buffeted, making decisions on the fly with limited information, emotional information. And then you we end up reacting and not responding in many areas in our lives. And the last thing I want to say, again, is just because you failed, just because you dropped the ball, just because you betrayed someone, just because you made an egregious mistake, just because you crossed the line, because you did something, you still have to be here. And my point is, don't take your life. Don't think you have to die to pay a price because you hurt someone. It just means that you can't ever be around that person, or the people who would judge you. You got to be required to be around those people. It doesn't mean that other people who don't know you will receive you and allow you to evolve and develop and become a new individual. They can see you for who you are in the moment. I saw, I think the last year there was a case where a guy committed a crime years ago, like 40 years ago, and he escaped. And when they caught up with him, he had been 30 some years, 30, 40 years as a model citizen, got a degree, became a school teacher. He wife, kids, grandkids, and they arrested him for what he did 30, 40 years ago. And because of the way the society is designed, he had to pay the crime. But thank God there was a judge who took in took consideration of the fact that the rehabilitation. So he had to do time for escaping, but not for because he it was obviously that he had been rehabilitated. He was obviously that he had learned lessons and went on to become a model citizen. It didn't mean that he wasn't guilty. It doesn't mean that, you follow me? It doesn't mean that he didn't do what he did. But we can all recover from what we do, because what we do is not who we are. I'm GABethel, and that was just my wisdom speak for today. God bless you. I just see when I do.